The sun hung like a dying ember over Redemption Ridge, casting long shadows across the dusty main street where a crowd had gathered in a cruel circle. At its center stood Clara Ashford, her wrists bound with coarse rope, her once pristine dress, now torn and stained with the red earth of the frontier. The townspeople jeered and pointed, their faces twisted with a mixture of amusement and disgust. "Look at the high and mighty heiress now," shouted Jeremiah Crane, the town's self-appointed moral authority. "Caught red-handed stealing from the very mine that made her family rich." Clara's emerald eyes blazed with defiance despite her humiliating position. Her dark hair, usually pinned in an elegant chignon, hung loose around her shoulders, framing a face that bore the proud cheekbones of her Scottish ancestors. She had been the untouchable daughter of mining magnate Robert Ashford, but now she stood accused of theft, her reputation in tatters. 30 years old and still unmarried?" cackled Mrs. Pemberton, the banker's wife. "No wonder she's turned to thievery. What decent man would want damaged goods?" The crowd's laughter echoed off the wooden storefronts, but it died abruptly when a shadow fell across the circle. A man emerged from the saloon, his spurs chinking softly against the boardwalk. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. His black hat was pulled low, obscuring his features, but there was something in his bearing that commanded respect. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. The crowd parted reluctantly as he approached. This was Cole Mathias, a man who spoke little but carried himself with the confidence of someone who had seen the elephant and lived to tell about it. He had arrived in Redemption Ridge 3 months ago with nothing but a tired horse and a well-worn Colt .45, but already the smart money knew not to cross him. "This ain't your concern, stranger," Crane warned, his voice wavering slightly. Cole's gaze never left Clara's face. "I'll take her," he said simply. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Taking a woman in bondage meant assuming responsibility for her debts, her crimes, and her future. It was an old frontier custom, rarely invoked, and even more rarely honored. "You don't know what you're saying," Crane protested. "She's accused of stealing gold from the Ashford mine. That's a hanging offense." Cole stepped closer to Clara, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. She met his gaze steadily, her chin raised in defiance despite her circumstances. There was something familiar about her, something that tugged at memories he had tried to bury. "What's your name?" he asked her. "Clara Ashford," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The name hit him like a physical blow. Clara Ashford. He had known that name once, had whispered it in the darkness of a mining camp tent 20 years ago, but that Clara had been a child then, the daughter of the mine owner who had shown kindness to a half-starved boy working the claims. "I remember you," he said softly, so only she could hear. "You gave me bread when I was hungry." Her eyes widened, in recognition, searching his weathered features for the boy she had once known. "Cole? Cole Mathias? But you were supposed to be dead?" He smiled grimly. "So were you, according to the reports I heard." The crowd was growing restless, sensing drama but unable to hear the quiet conversation between the bound woman and the mysterious cowboy. Sheriff Hawkins pushed through the crowd, his star gleaming dully in the fading light. "Now see here, Mathias," the sheriff began, but Cole cut him off with a raised hand. "Sheriff, I'm invoking frontier law. I'll take responsibility for Miss Ashford." "You can't be serious," Hawkins sputtered. "She's accused of stealing $5,000 in gold dust from her own family's mine." "Then I'll pay her debt," Cole said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out a leather pouch that clinked heavily with coins. $5,000 in gold plus whatever damages you deem appropriate." The crowd gasped. That was more money than most of them would see in a lifetime, casually offered by a man who dressed like a common drifter. "Where'd you get that kind of money?" Crane demanded suspiciously. Cole's hand drifted to his gun. "That's my business." Sheriff Hawkins looked between Cole and the hostile crowd, calculating the odds. He was a practical man who knew when to avoid trouble. "Very well, Miss Ashford," is released into your custody. But if she runs, it's on your head. Cole stepped forward and cut Clara's bonds with a knife that appeared and disappeared so quickly that several onlookers weren't sure they had seen it. She rubbed her chafed wrists, her eyes never leaving his face. "Why?" she whispered as the crowd began to disperse, disappointed at being denied their spectacle. "Because," he said, "I believe in paying my debts." The Ashford mining office sat at the edge of town, a modest wooden building that belied the fortune it had once managed. Clara led Cole through the dusty interior, past filing cabinets and surveyor's maps, to a small apartment in the back where she had been living since her father's death 6 months earlier. "I didn't steal that gold," she said as soon as they were alone, her composure finally cracking. "I was trying to prevent it from being stolen." Cole poured himself a glass of water from a pitcher on the table, his movements deliberate and careful. "Tell me what happened." Clara sank into a chair, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "My father died suddenly last winter. Heart attack, the doctor said. He left everything to me, the mine, the house, all of it. But there's been pressure to sell." "What kind of pressure?" "The kind that involves threats and mysterious accidents." She looked up at him, her green eyes fierce. "Someone wants the Ashford mine very badly, Cole. Badly enough to frame me for theft to force a sale." Cole set down his glass and studied her face. 20 years had changed the girl he remembered into a woman of remarkable strength and beauty, but he could still see traces of the child who had shown kindness to a stranger. "Who's pressuring you?" "Officially, a consortium of investors from San Francisco, represented by a lawyer named Harrison Gray." "Unofficially," she shrugged. "Half the town council, the bank president, and probably Sheriff Hawkins." "Why don't you just sell? 5,000 acres of played-out claims can't be worth all this trouble." Clara's laugh was bitter. "Played out? Is that what they told you?" She stood and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting of the California mountains. After working the combination, she withdrew a leather portfolio and spread its contents on the table. Cole found himself looking at geological surveys, assay reports, and technical drawings that meant nothing to him. But the numbers at the bottom of each page were clear enough. "Sweet Jesus," he breathed. "How much gold are we talking about?" "Conservative estimate, $2 million, maybe 3. Clara's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she gathered the papers. "My father spent years mapping the underground river system. The mother lode isn't in the worked claims. It's 300 feet deeper, following an underground stream that runs clear to the California border." Cole felt his mouth go dry. $3 million in gold was enough to buy a small state, enough to make men kill without hesitation. "Does anyone else know about this?" "My father's surveyor, a man named Thomas Brennan, but he disappeared the same week my father died." Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. "They found his body in the river 2 days later. Accidental drowning," the sheriff said. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture that made Cole's blood run cold. They killed him to keep him quiet, and now they're trying to force you out so they can claim the deep deposits themselves. But they need clear title to the land. As long as I'm alive and fighting, they can't just take it." Clara met his eyes. "Unless they can prove I'm a criminal unfit to inherit. So they planted gold dust on you and called it theft. $5,000 worth taken from the mine's own strongbox. Enough to constitute grand larceny, punishable by hanging or deportation." Clara's smile was grim. "They made one mistake, though. They didn't count on you." Cole stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening street. Lanterns were being lit in windows, and he could see men moving in the shadows. Too many men for a casual evening stroll. "We're being watched," he said quietly. Clara joined him at the window. "They won't move against us directly. Not yet. But come morning, there'll be new charges, new accusations. They'll keep coming until they get what they want. Or until someone stops them." Cole turned to face her, his expression serious. "Clara, there's something you need to know. Something about why I really came to Redemption Ridge." She waited, sensing the weight of whatever revelation was coming. "I'm Robert Ashford's son." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Clara stared at him, her face cycling through disbelief, shock, and finally, understanding. That's impossible. My father never had a son. He would have told me. He didn't know. Cole's voice was rough with old pain. My mother was a saloon girl in Virginia City. She worked the mining camps, following the silver strikes. Robert Ashford was young then, before he made his fortune, before he met your mother. They had a brief relationship. Clara sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. How do you know this? Because she told me on her deathbed. Gave me this. Cole reached into his shirt and pulled out a locket on a chain. Inside was a small, daguerreotype of a young Robert Ashford, unmistakably the same man Clara remembered as her father. She made me promise never to contact him, never to burden him with the knowledge. Said he had made a good life for himself, had a legitimate family. But when I heard he had died, Cole's voice trailed off. You came to see what he had built, Clara finished. To see the family you never had. And I found his daughter about to lose everything to a pack of vultures. Cole's jaw tightened. I couldn't let that happen. Clara stood and walked to him, studying his face in the lamplight. Now that she knew what to look for, she could see the resemblance. The same strong jaw, the same stubborn set to the shoulders. My God, she whispered. You're my brother. Half-brother, Cole corrected. But yes, the implications crashed over her like a wave. Then you have as much right to the inheritance as I do. Maybe more, if you can prove paternity. I don't want the mine, Clara. I never did. Cole's voice was firm. I came here because I heard my father's daughter was in trouble. That's all. Before Clara could respond, the sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet evening. Cole spun toward the window, his gun appearing in his hand with practiced speed. Dark shapes were moving in the alley behind the building, and the smell of kerosene drifted through the broken window. Fire, Clara gasped. They're going to burn us out. Cole grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the front door. The safe. Can you carry those papers? Already done. Clara patted a leather satchel slung across her shoulder. I've been sleeping with them every night since Father died. They burst through the front door just as flames began licking at the rear of the building. The street was full of men now, their faces lit by the growing fire. Sheriff Hawkins stood at their head, his expression regretful but determined. Sorry, Miss Ashford, he called out. Seems your building's caught fire. Terrible accident. Nothing accidental about it, Cole replied, his gun still drawn. I count at least 6 men with torches. Now that's a serious accusation, Hawkins said. You got proof of that? I got eyes. The sheriff's hand moved toward his gun, but he stopped when he saw the steadiness of Cole's aim. You're outnumbered. Matthias, 12-1 ain't good odds even for a man with your reputation. What reputation is that, Sheriff? Word came in on the telegraph an hour ago. Seems you're wanted in Arizona territory for bank robbery. $5,000 reward. Cole felt Clara tense beside him, but he kept his expression calm. Funny how that telegram arrived just after I posted bond for Miss Ashford. Justice don't wait for convenience, Hawkins replied. Now drop your gun and surrender peaceful and maybe we can work something out. Cole glanced at Clara, seeing the fear in her eyes. Not fear for herself, but for him. The realization that she cared about his fate, despite knowing him for only a few hours, stirred something deep in his chest. I got a better idea, he said loudly, his voice carrying to every man on the street. How about we settle this like civilized folks? What do you mean? A trade. I'll give you what you really want in exchange for safe passage out of town for Miss Ashford. Jeremiah Crane pushed forward, his eyes gleaming with greed. We don't want anything from you, gunslinger. Don't. You? Cole reached into his coat with his free hand and withdrew a folded document. Even in the flickering firelight, the official seals were visible. Seems to me you want clear title to the Ashford mine. Well, here it is. Clara gasped. Cole, what are you doing? What needs to be done? He never took his eyes off the crowd. This here is Robert Ashford's will, the real one, filed with the territorial government in Sacramento 3 days before he died. The murmur that ran through the crowd was like the growl of a hungry animal. Crane stepped forward, his hand extended. "Give it here." "Not so fast," Cole smiled grimly. "This will names his heir, but it ain't who you think." "That's impossible," Clara whispered. "I saw Father's will. I inherited everything." "You saw a copy of his original will, the one he filed 10 years ago. But when a man finds out he has a son, sometimes he changes his mind about who should carry on his legacy." Cole held up the document so the firelight illuminated its contents. "According to this, Robert Ashford left his entire estate to his son, Cole Matthias, born Virginia City, Nevada, 1849. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara stared at him in shock, while the crowd digested this new information. It was Crane who spoke first. "You're lying, that's a forgery." "Easy enough to prove. Send a telegram to Sacramento, check the records." Cole's voice was conversational, but his gun never wavered. "Course, that might take a few days, and in the meantime, as the legal owner of the Ashford mine, I'd be well within my rights to defend my property." Sheriff Hawkins was sweating despite the cool evening air. "Even if that will is genuine, you're still wanted for bank robbery." "Funny thing about that," Cole replied. "Seems the real bank robbers were caught yesterday in Tucson. Telegraph operator at the depot showed me the message, an hour before your fake one arrived." The crowd was beginning to murmur among themselves, sensing that their carefully laid plans were unraveling. Cole pressed his advantage. "Here's what's going to happen," he announced. "Miss Ashford and I are going to walk to the stable and collect our horses. Then we're going to ride out of town. Anyone who tries to stop us will answer to Winchester justice." "And the will?" Crane asked desperately. Cole looked at the document in his hand, then at Clara's stricken face. In her eyes he saw not just the loss of her inheritance, but the crushing realization that her father had chosen to leave everything to a son he had never acknowledged over the daughter who had devoted her life to him. "The will," Cole said slowly, "is mine to do with as I please." He struck a match with his thumbnail and held it near the document. The crowd leaned forward collectively, their greed overcoming their caution. "No!" Crane shouted. "You can't destroy it." "Watch me," Cole replied, and with deliberate slowness he touched the flame to the corner of the paper. But instead of letting it burn, he suddenly extinguished the flame and folded the will back into his coat. "Changed my mind. I think I'll keep it after all." The psychological effect was devastating. Half the crowd surged forward, desperate to get their hands on the document, while the other half held back, uncertain of Cole's intentions. In the confusion, he grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her toward the stable at the end of the street. "The horses are saddled and ready," he told her as they ran. "I paid the stable boy to keep them prepared. You planned this?" "I planned for trouble. In my experience, it usually finds a way to arrive." They reached the stable just as the first shots rang out behind them. Cole's horse was a magnificent black stallion, while Clara's was a spirited chestnut mare that danced nervously at the sound of gunfire. "Can you ride?" Cole asked as he helped her mount. "Better than most men," Clara replied, gathering the reins with practiced hands. They burst from the stable at a full gallop, Cole's stallion thundering down the main street while Clara's mare kept pace beside him. Behind them, the crowd was in chaos. Some men trying to organize pursuit while others fought over the smoldering remains of the mining office. They rode hard for an hour, following a trail that wound up into the foothills where the air grew thin and the stars seemed close enough to touch. Finally, Cole called a halt beside a small stream where they could water the horses and catch their breath. "Why did you do that?" Clara asked as soon as they dismounted. "You could have claimed everything. The mine, the money, all of it." Cole looked at her across the flickering light of the small fire he had built. "Because it was never mine to claim. But the will is real," Cole admitted. "Your father did leave everything to me, but he wrote it when he thought you were dead." Clara's face went white. "What?" 3 years ago, there were reports that Robert Ashford's daughter had died in a San Francisco fire. Hotel collapse, they said. By the time he learned it was a case of mistaken identity, he had already changed his will. Cole's voice was gentle. "When he found out you were alive, he was going to change it back. But he died before he could make it official. So legally, you own everything? Legally, yes. Morally? Cole shook his head. You're the one who loved him, Clara. You're the one who stayed by his side, who helped him build his dream. I was just a ghost from his past. Clara was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. What happens now? Now we go to Sacramento and file a new will, one that leaves everything to Robert Ashford's beloved daughter, as it should be. And what about you? Where will you go? Cole smiled, the expression transforming his weathered features. I was thinking I might stick around, help my sister work her mine, maybe, if she'll have me. Clara looked up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. Just like that? You'd give up a fortune? Clara, for 20 years I thought I was alone in the world. Now I find out I have family, someone who shares my blood, who knew my father, who can tell me what kind of man he really was. Cole's voice was rough with emotion. That's worth more than all the gold in California. She stood and walked to him, placing her hands on his weathered cheeks. He was a good man, Cole. Stubborn, proud, sometimes foolish, but good. And he would have been proud to call you his son. Even if I never amounted to much? You saved your sister from a lynch mob and gave up a fortune to do what was right. I'd say you amounted to quite a lot. They embraced then, two people who had found family in each other when they thought they were completely alone. In the distance, the lights of Redemption Ridge flickered like dying stars. But here by the stream, under the vast canopy of the western sky, the future seemed full of possibilities. 6 months later, the Ashford mine was producing more gold than anyone had dreamed possible. The deep deposits that Robert Ashford had mapped proved even richer than his surveys had indicated, and the underground river system extended much further into the mountains than anyone had suspected. Cole stood at the entrance to the main shaft, watching crews of miners emerge into the late afternoon sunlight, their faces streaked with dust and exhaustion, but their eyes bright with satisfaction. The mine now employed 60 men and was the largest operation in 3 counties. Quite a sight, Clara said, joining him at the shaft entrance. 6 months of good food and steady work had restored her beauty, and she carried herself with the confidence of a woman who had faced down her enemies and emerged victorious. Father would be amazed, she continued, looking out over the bustling complex of buildings and equipment that now surrounded the original mine entrance. I think he'd be proud, Cole replied. Not just of the mine, but of what you've built here. Was true. Clara had used the mine's profits not just to expand the operation, but to build a school, a hospital, and decent housing for the workers and their families. Redemption Ridge had transformed from a hardscrabble mining camp into a real town, complete with tree-lined streets and a sense of community. We've built, Clara corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Cole had proven as talented at business as he was with a gun. His natural leadership and practical intelligence had made him invaluable in managing the day-to-day operations of the mine, while his reputation kept the more unscrupulous elements at bay. Any word from Sheriff Hawkins? Cole asked. Clara's expression darkened slightly. He's been indicted by the territorial government for conspiracy and fraud. So have Jeremiah Crane and half the town council. Turns out that consortium from San Francisco is mostly fictional, just Crane and his associates trying to steal the mine through legal manipulation. And Harrison Gray fled to Mexico the day after we escaped, took about $50,000 in embezzled funds with him. Clara shook her head. Amazing how quickly rats abandon a sinking ship. A young boy came running up to them, his face flushed with excitement. Miss Clara, Mr. Cole, there's riders coming up the valley road. Looks like important folks. Cole and Clara exchanged glances. Important visitors usually meant trouble, especially for people who had recently been wanted, criminals. They walked to the edge of the mining camp, where they could see a small cavalcade approaching along the dusty road that wound up from the valley floor. 3 men on horseback, followed by a carriage bearing official territorial markings. Territorial governor's carriage, Clara observed. What do you suppose he wants? Guess we'll find out soon enough. The party drew to a halt in front of the mine office, and a distinguished man in his 50s dismounted from the lead horse. He wore a suit that proclaimed wealth and position, but his bearing suggested military training. "Miss Ashford? Mr. Matthias?" His voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to command. "I'm Governor William Patterson. I wonder if we might have a word?" They invited the governor and his party into the mine office, where Clara served coffee while Cole remained standing by the window, his hand never far from his gun. "Relax, Mr. Matthias," the governor said with a slight smile. "I'm not here to arrest anyone, quite the opposite, in fact." He opened a leather portfolio and withdrew several official-looking documents. "The territorial government has been investigating the activities of certain individuals in Redemption Ridge. What we've found is quite disturbing." "How so?" Clara asked. "Conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, and what amounts to an organized criminal enterprise designed to steal private property through legal manipulation." The governor's expression was grim. "Sheriff Hawkins and his associates have been operating a protection racket for years, targeting successful mining operations and forcing sales at below-market prices." Cole frowned. "How many operations?" "At least 12 that we can document. The Ashford mine was simply their most ambitious target." Patterson looked directly at Clara. "Your father had filed complaints with the territorial government before his death. He suspected he was being poisoned." Clara's face went white. "Poisoned?" "Slow-acting arsenic administered over several months. We exhumed his body last week. The coroner's report confirms it." The governor's voice was gentle but firm. "Your father was murdered, Miss Ashford, and we believe Thomas Brennan was killed because he discovered evidence of the poisoning." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Clara stared at the coffee cup in her hands, trying to process the knowledge that her father had been murdered for his mine. "What happens now?" Cole asked. "Justice," Patterson replied simply. "The territorial government is prepared to offer you both full pardons for any questionable actions you may have taken in defending yourselves. In addition, we're prepared to offer Mr. Matthias a position as territorial marshal, if he's interested." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Marshal? We need men who can't be bought, Mr. Matthias. Men who understand that justice sometimes requires unconventional methods." The governor smiled. "Your reputation precedes you. The way you handled the situation in Redemption Ridge has impressed a lot of important people. I appreciate the offer, Governor, but I've got responsibilities here. The position would be based here in the territory. You'd be responsible for investigating mining fraud and protecting legitimate operations from criminal interference." Patterson leaned forward. "Think of it as doing officially what you've already been doing unofficially." Clara looked at Cole, seeing the interest in his eyes despite his cautious words. "It's a good opportunity, Cole, and it would help a lot of people." "What about the mine?" "I think I can manage," Clara said with a smile. "I've got a good foreman, and besides, you'd still be here most of the time." Cole considered the offer, weighing the chance to make a real difference against the simple pleasure of working with his hands and building something with his sister. "I'll take the job," he said finally. "On one condition." "What's that?" "I want deputies I can trust, and I want the authority to clean out every corrupt sheriff and crooked judge in the territory." Governor Patterson's smile was predatory. "Mr. Matthias, I was hoping you'd say that." 2 years later, Cole Matthias was known throughout California territory as the Marshal, who couldn't be bought, threatened, or intimidated. His badge carried the weight of territorial authority, but his reputation was built on something far more valuable: the knowledge that he would face down any man, no matter how powerful, in defense of justice. The Ashford mine continued to prosper under Clara's management, becoming the cornerstone of a growing community that now boasted over 3,000 residents. The town of New Redemption, as it had been renamed, was a model of what the American West could become when decent people were given the chance to build something lasting. On a warm evening in late summer, Cole sat on the porch of the house he had built overlooking the valley, watching the sun set behind the distant mountains. Clara joined him, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade and wearing the contented expression of a woman who had found her place in the world. "Telegram from Sacramento," she said, handing him one of the glasses along with a yellow envelope. Cole read the message and smiled. Governor Patterson wants me to investigate mining fraud in Montana Territory. Seems there's a group of investors trying to force out homesteaders by claiming their land contains valuable mineral deposits. When do you leave? Next week. It'll probably take a couple of months to sort out. Cole looked at his sister, noting the slight sadness in her eyes. You could come along. Take a break from the mine. Clara shook her head. My place is here. Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on things while you're gone. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the western sky. In the distance, the lights of New Redemption twinkled like earthbound stars, each one representing a family that had found hope and opportunity in this remote corner of the territory. Do you ever regret it? Clara asked suddenly. Giving up your inheritance, I mean. Cole considered the question, looking out over the prosperous community that had grown up around the mine, thinking of the countless families that now had good jobs and secure futures because of the decisions they had made. No, he said finally. I've got everything I ever wanted. Which is family, purpose, the knowledge that I'm making a difference. He turned to look at her, his weathered face serious. You know what the difference is between gold and family, Clara? She shook her head. Gold can be stolen, spent, or lost. But family is forever. Clara reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. Father would be proud of both of us. I think he would, Cole agreed. I think he'd be proud of what we built together. As if summoned by their words, a gentle breeze stirred the evening air, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the distant sound of children's laughter from the town below. It was the scent of home, of community, of dreams fulfilled through hard work and moral courage. In the gathering darkness, neither of them spoke of the will that still lay locked in Clara's safe, the document that could have made Cole one of the richest men in California. It had served its purpose that night in Redemption Ridge, providing the leverage they needed to escape with their lives. But its true value had never been the wealth it represented. Its true value had been the choice it forced them to make, between greed and righteousness, between selfish ambition and family loyalty. In choosing to tear up his legal claim to the mine, Cole had gained something far more precious than gold. He had gained a sister's love and respect, and the knowledge that he was capable of putting others before himself. The stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, ancient lights bearing witness to the eternal human struggle between what we want and what we know is right. In a world where men killed for gold and power, where justice was often bought and sold like any other commodity, the story of Cole Mathias and Clara Ashford had become something rare and precious, a reminder that some things matter more than money, and that the greatest fortunes are measured not in gold, but in the love and respect of those who know us best. The wind whispered through the valley one final time, carrying their story out into the vast darkness of the frontier, where it would be told and retold around countless campfires, a testament to the truth that real wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we're willing to sacrifice for those we love. The story you've just experienced speaks to one of the most fundamental choices we all face, the choice between wealth and what truly matters. Cole Mathias gave up a fortune to do what was right, to protect his sister, and to build something lasting for his community. But this isn't just a story from the Old West. It's a choice that confronts us every day. In our modern world, we're constantly forced to choose between personal gain and moral courage, between taking the easy path and standing up for what's right. Have you ever had to choose between love and money? Between what you wanted and what you knew was right? Maybe you had to turn down a lucrative job that would have hurt your family. Maybe you sacrificed financial security to care for a loved one. Maybe you stood up to a boss or colleague when you saw something wrong, even though it cost you professionally. Your story matters. Your choices, your struggles, your moments of moral courage, they're just as important as Cole and Clara's. They're the building blocks of character, the foundation of a life well lived. We want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments below. Tell us about a time when you chose principle over profit, family over fortune, or courage over comfort. Your experience could inspire our next video and help someone else facing a similar choice. This community we're building together values the same things Cole Mathias valued: courage, justice, and the belief that everyone has the right to defend what's theirs, even when the price is high. We believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose to put others before themselves. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Every subscription helps us reach more people with stories that matter, stories that remind us of what's truly important in life. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if it made you think, made you feel, or reminded you of your own struggles and triumphs. Together, we're more than just viewers and creators. We're a community of people who believe that character matters, that justice is worth fighting for, and that the greatest treasures in life can't be bought with gold. What's your story? We're listening.